Things have been getting hotter lately at the point where the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden meet, mostly due to the negative news that keeps coming from that region. For example, modern pirates frequently force people to perform ship rescue operations, but over the past 10 years, China has launched along with a plethora of other time and money-intensive projects, a construction project in this tiny but vital country. Djibouti was conducted largely in the Chinese style. Dredging removed millions of tons of sand from the seabed off the African nation's coast, and in the end, a crucial item that would first be beneficial to China. Never venture thousands of miles from its borders for its own sake. Second, Djibouti will benefit, and third, Ethiopia will benefit as well. It sounds complicated, so let's simplify it. There are many nations that have historically been in highly advantageous locations, and Djibouti is a prime example of this. A port was established on the coast of Djibouti in 1896, and no, there was no Chinese influence here, but China was still far from its current level of influence. This is because the country's shores are located in a region where you can sail from the Gulf of Aden into the Red Sea, and then through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean. It's important to note that, in contrast to Djibouti, Ethiopia's needs drove much of the port's construction. The port's location is far from ideal, with no access to the sea and a completely blocked path to international routes. France was the country that started the construction of the port facilities back when Djibouti was a French colony. The port of neighboring Djibouti was busy at the beginning of the 20th century with ships sailing between Africa, Asia, and Europe, and vice versa, but development continued after that. From 1848 to 1957, they constructed 4 deep water berths and dredged the approach channels, proving that dredging was already taking place. In addition to adding new warehouses and oil storage facilities to the port, the deepening was required because larger transport ships were striking the waterways to dock ports. They required greater depth, and Djibouti, being in such a prime trading location, couldn't miss the chance to accommodate even the most advanced vessels of the time. The port was already changing as part of the global maritime exchange network. The Red Sea became one of the busiest shipping routes in the world, and Djibouti found itself playing the role. Overall, the port was keeping up with the trends from the 1960s to the 1970s. Water and electricity supplies were set up and railway lines were laid. Its service station was already in the early years of the new century. In 2009, the port received a brand new container terminal with a large pier. Naturally, the depth was increased to 59 feet to accommodate the most efficient ships used in international maritime trade. 25 million TEUs is equivalent to 25 million 20-foot containers. How much did the new container terminal increase the port of Djibouti's influence? You can see for yourself that when the new facility was finished in 2009, slightly over 350,000 TEU went through the port in 2008. The number increased to 519,000 by 2016, and the port of Djibouti was handling 987,000 TEU. Prior to the improvement, the port was a major trading hub between Asia, Europe, and sections of Africa, and its significance increased dramatically. Now let's discuss the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which everyone has heard about. To keep it brief, this initiative involves China investing enormous sums of money in the infrastructure of other nations, thereby increasing its influence. One aspect of this initiative is the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road, which, as you can see on this map, passes through Djibouti, specifically the Port Plus. Ethiopia essentially conducts 95% of its international trade through the port. By the way, Ethiopia is one of China's largest trading partners in Africa. With the growth of global trade over the past 10 years, the port of Djibouti required more upgrades than just a new container terminal. You see where we're headed with this. It's a perfect. The Chinese recognized this as an investment opportunity in the mid-2010s, and in 2014, work on the Dora Multipurpose Port, also known as DMP, the largest port facility constructed by Chinese construction companies in Africa, began. China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, or CCECC, and China Construction. How did they choose to build it? Well, it's important to note that a portion of Djibouti City, along with its main port and container terminal, is actually land that was reclaimed from the sea. The site was picked by the Harbor and Channel Engineering Bureau Group because it was fairly close to both of those locations. The decision to turn the sea into land was made because they carried out reclamation work. Yes, the Djiboutians have long understood what it means to reclaim land from the sea, and the Chinese are obviously skilled at doing so as well, having completed hundreds or even thousands of ports and other projects of various sizes. Again, dredging work began to lay the foundation for the port, then specialized ships arrived to carve out pits on the prepared site, or simply put trenches. These trenches became the perimeter of the future port. Stones were laid and then leveled out, and then came the most impressive part, building the wall that would separate the port area from the using specialized equipment. The wall was placed, and then more stones were poured into the DMP construction. The blocks that made up the perimeter were then concretized, turning them into a quay area, and the enclosed area was obviously fully filled in. However, there is no precise information regarding how much. The length of the port that was constructed was 3,940 feet, and the total area of the artificial land was 23, despite the material being used. 7 million square feet, which indicates that a lot of work was done. After a while, the Douro multipurpose port received its. Unfortunately for the builders, the dredging work didn't end there. No one had anticipated that the port should be able to handle the types of ships that are frequently used in today's world, so the next round of dredging work started, which, as you probably guessed, the area is used to. Once more, a number of specialized vessels showed up to collect sand and other materials from the bottom and either dump them on land or drop them off somewhere else where dredging is not required. Ultimately, the Chinese and Djibouti agreed that a depth of 50 feet would allow the DMP to handle ships with a dead weight of. In addition to having a total cargo capacity of up to 100,000 tons, the port can accommodate some Panamax vessels because, according to various sources, they can weigh more than 100,000 tons dead weight and have a draft of about 49 feet. Additionally, the port has docks that can handle those same vessels with a dead weight of. We're talking about the modern world with an endless flow of containers, and the DMP wasn't really built to handle an endless flow of containers. On top of that, DMP has installed 12 cranes for general cargo and 4 cranes for containers, which is up to 100,000 tons. However, there is a container terminal nearby that the Douro multipurpose port is named such for a reason. It can handle not only containers but also a variety of other goods that enter or exit Djibouti. Therefore, the Chinese outfitted the DMP with a line for grain bags that can hold 300 tons each in order for the port to be granted multipurpose status. The EMP can store large amounts of the resource for a while before it's time to ship, thanks to the construction of a storage facility for 85,000 tons of grain and a line for fertilizers with the same capacity. The Chinese also constructed storage for fertilizers, but it holds 145,000 tons in addition to all the structures. The builder installed a 215,000 square foot area for storing various cargo, such as bags, and 344,000 square feet for unloading and temporarily storing bulk goods, such as grain, directly on the base that was reclaimed from the sea. MP was also made to import land vehicles, and not just a few Chinese builders outfitted the port with. It appears that a great deal of work has been done, but that was only the first phase, which was finished back in 2017. The second phase, which will require a significant amount of work, will be built around the port and will include thousands of car slots as well as numerous warehouses to store anything. There are plans to build a number of extensions, but the main and most labor-intensive part is extending the overall length of the pier to 13,550 feet, which means the port is supposed to grow by roughly 4 times. The first phase of the project cost $300 million, and the total project cost is estimated to be $590 million. We haven't yet discussed the oil terminal, which is situated here. It has a capacity of 98 million gallons, but there is a planned expansion that will allow it to handle 26 million gallons. The plan states that this will double the number of docks. Let's review what Djibouti currently has: the main port, the container terminal, and the new multipurpose port. Million more gallons of oil, but they don't think they're finished for Djibouti's ports and terminals. In 2021, the country partnered with Ethiopia to construct a brand new multipurpose port called Douro that has the ability to handle livestock animals that were already being brought in through Djibouti's port facilities. The newly constructed terminal can process 2, which is all that is required for such a complicated work. The terminal contains rest facilities and quarantine services needed before delivering the entire package, which includes 5 million animals annually, 1,000 camels, 500 cattle, and 4,270 goats or sheep every day. This new port will be especially helpful for Ethiopia, which has been actively engaging with Djibouti on the building. According to Ethiopia Expo 2020, the country had 31 cattle, 3 million, 32 million sheep, goats, 7 million, 60 and 42 million camels. The Ethiopian Minister of Agriculture stated that since the country has one of the biggest livestock populations in Africa, -0.4 million birds, why not sell the animals that are needed domestically right away? Since Djibouti, Ethiopia's gateway to the world of maritime trade, has only become more significant in the eyes of its neighbor, there is no need to even consider it. Overall, Ethiopia is undoubtedly happy with everything that is happening with regard to the animal trade. But what about the multipurpose port? Ethiopia's primary gateway to international maritime trade is Djibouti, and DMP is an extension of that gateway. The port opened in 2017 and can handle 220,000 TEUs and 8 million tons of cargo annually. So Ethiopia can now increase its trade through Djibouti, and it's not limited to containers. Before the DMP arrived, Djibouti's main port was having trouble for a very basic reason. It was built in the 19th century and had undergone several upgrades before running out of space to grow. As a result, cargo could not be processed in time and could remain in the port for weeks. Naturally, this resulted in delays that also impacted Ethiopia because nearly all of its maritime imports and exports went via Djibouti. The congestion problem persisted even after the container terminal was completed. In fact, the terminal itself began handling cargo too slowly until DMP arrived, which had an hourly capacity of 90 unloading units and 31 containers per hour. Now that the other port facilities have been unloaded, it takes days rather than weeks to complete everything, greatly increasing Ethiopia's trade. Djibouti also gains from the new port's construction in a similar manner, as the nation is actively involved in international trade in addition to providing its territory for other people to trade. But Djibouti also benefited from jobs during the construction phase. Of course, there were more, but first, the port itself needs to run, which requires workers, and second, the next phase of construction is planned, so the Djiboutians will obviously have a way to earn some money. What will the China, a nation that actively participated in the port's construction, is the first to come to mind. On the port's western edge, China intended to park its warships, and the depth is ideal for these kinds of vessels to maneuver around. In fact, this is a Chinese military base. It opened shortly after the new port's construction was completed and is only a short drive from DMP. It was reported that 2 months after DMP was constructed, Chinese and Djiboutians reconnected to commemorate the completion of this military wonder. This base, which is operated by the Chinese Navy, reportedly has exclusive. China's military presence in the region makes strategic sense because the westernmost port docks are used by at least one of the ports. It's a key location because the Red Sea's entrance is an important trade route and part of the 21st century maritime Silk Road. China couldn't ignore Djibouti because the nation is currently attempting to extend its influence globally. Do you recall that the new port's construction site is continuously threatened by attacks from different groups? This is precisely how China officially justified building a military facility in Djibouti. A Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs representative cited the country's involvement in international anti-piracy escort missions in the Gulf of Aden, where China has been actively participating since 2008. Now let's take another look at the map. You can see a Chinese military base here, but pay attention. It's a U.S. military installation. The Combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa is home to more than 4,000 American soldiers at Camp Lemon. This is the first time that two superpowers and their militaries have had such close, ongoing contact, and it's also possible that China established a military base in Djibouti to thwart U.S. military aspirations in this region. But it's not really worth concentrating on that because China primarily uses trade and finance to expand its influence rather than military force. Therefore, the PRC can increase trade volumes with Djibouti and, of course, Ethiopia, China's neighbor, by enhancing Djibouti's port infrastructure. Principal trading partner in Africa, and China specifically invested in a railway line connecting Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, to Djibouti. The necessity for this route arose primarily because the two nations were unable to effectively transport goods between themselves by train as the existing railway constructed by. Following France's failure in 2004 because to its advanced age and inadequate maintenance at the end of the 19th and early 20th centuries, China, represented by its construction businesses and the Exim Bank, contributed $2 billion of the $3 billion allotted for the route, $4 billion to the Ethiopian government segment, and the remaining sum for the Djibouti section. Following its inauguration in 2018, Ethiopia, Djibouti, and China shared a 24-person trade rail link. With 9 million tons of cargo annually, this is the ideal route to create consistent, substantial trade that favors China, Ethiopia, and